Today we're with our special guest, Kimberly Hamburg. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too. We're very happy to have you and have a great conversation today. Would you mind giving our listeners the 411 on who you are, your background, and what you're bringing to the show today?
Oh, absolutely. You probably should have researched this before you brought me on the show, because now you're going to find out what I truly do.
Uh-oh.
No. Hey, we were talking beforehand. I live in West Virginia, born and raised here all my life. It's an absolutely beautiful state. My corporate career was educational consulting. So I worked for companies where we would write proposals. I did corporate development. I was the person that brought strategic partners to the table, brought in multi-year, multi-million-dollar projects, and absolutely loved it. And I was in leadership roles early on and started to realize that we were putting people in leadership roles that should not be in leadership roles. So there were a couple gut kicks, and all of a sudden, my 30-year corporate career, I said I resigned, and I started my own business.
And what's your own business?
Kimberly Hamburg Consulting. So I'm a leadership development and growth trainer and coach. I tell people I design empowered leaders because I truly believe we are all leaders first and foremost of ourselves, and that we all have potential inside of us that a lot of times we don't recognize. And so working with a coach, I help you understand your full potential and live into what you're supposed to do.
Now, how about the business owner that's out there that's listening to just the start of this podcast and they're like, you know what, I don't have time for a coach, or I don't have time for a business coach. I know what I'm doing. Leadership, I read a book about it or went on a seminar. What do I need to really incorporate that for? What's your elevator pitch on somebody that thinks like that?
Well, I get a lot of calls like that. And what I say to people is, I bless and release you to your higher good. I wish you all the best, because if somebody believes that they have absolutely nothing to learn, I'm not the person to work with them. I think we all have something to learn. I firmly believe that we're not meant to journey life alone, that we need to have somebody who pushes us, holds us accountable. And as a coach, I have coaches. So, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't get in the business of trying to persuade people to work with me. If they don't see the value of improving their lives, of living into their potential, of making a difference, then I'll work with people who do see that value.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, the leadership is so important of the way that somebody leads. And I think you're right in the sense that you can't really teach that. You have to be open to it. So for somebody that like, I'm sure you do get those calls where they're trying to, they want some kind of magic pill more than they want the hard facts of, they need to work on themselves to become a better leader.
Yeah, until you get the inside right, it doesn't matter the title, the position, and all the things on the outside. You truly have to do some inside work. And I say this from experience, because even though I had a corporate career of close to 30 years and I was very successful, I was always butting up against my limiting self-beliefs. And I see this in a number of successful people. And you can't outperform your limiting self-belief. And so even though I was successful, I was constantly hitting that lid. And I see that in a lot of people. And when it's happening, you kind of feel it in your gut. And those are the people that I want to work with. I want to take somebody who's good, and I want to push them to be great or extraordinary.
And when you typically work with somebody, is it a sense that if you want to work with them just from the conversation? Like, do you pick and choose your clients?
So I always have that intake conversation. I have said for years that I'm an acquired taste. Not everybody's going to like me and want to work with me. And that's a little nicer than sometimes saying there are people I don't want to work with. But to be perfectly honest, if you're going to do the internal work and work with a coach, you have to put the effort in. And you can tell pretty quickly if people are just reaching out to hear what you do so they can then take your language and go market themselves, or if they truly want to do the work. So I do select who I want to work with, but I also collaborate and have a lot of connections with other coaches, because if somebody reaches out and wants a coach, that's an absolute huge step. And I don't want to have a conversation with somebody and say, you know, Jason, it's just not a good fit. We're not going to work well together. And I don't want to leave him hanging. I'm going to refer him to another coach. And I believe strongly in that.
And what can you say about developing leaders through COVID? What have you said to your clients that you've been working with about this last year? Like, was anybody really prepared to lead through this, or what do you tell your clients based off of that?
Yeah, nobody was prepared to lead through this. I've said that to a team that I oversee. I said, listen, I have no idea how to lead through this, but we're going to get through it together. There were a couple early observations early on. So a lot of people who have been in leadership roles that had the mentality that your team is only successful if they have butts in the seat and you can see them working. I think they thought that this virtual working environment was going to go away a little bit, and it didn't. And so those people, when I have follow-up conversations with them, you know, I kind of ask them, are your metrics being met? Is the work getting done? And they said, yeah. And I said, so it doesn't matter where your people sit. But the one thing that I will say is leadership, when you're a leader and a crisis happens, you don't magically become a better leader. You were either a good leader before the crisis or not, because a crisis will refine or bring to the surface your leadership skills. And, you know, an observation, it is difficult to lead. It's different to lead a team virtually and an organization virtually than it is in person. And what I mean by that is when you're in person and you have a meeting, people quickly hop into the meeting and start having a conversation. We now have a dispersed team. We have a team that has, you know, back in March, they're working from home. And for people who have young children, and I have 2 grown children, they're 24 and 27, and I love them dearly. But I have never been so happy that I did not have to homeschool these children.
Oh, geez, don't even get me started.
So, you know, so I have so much respect and compassion. And leaders need to know that when you come into a meeting and when you see your team is frazzled, it takes little time to start that meeting with just asking, you know, hey, Nick, how are you doing? Really, and listening. You don't have to offer suggestions or solutions. Just let them know you care. And that's something that I've really seen. And I don't know, do you have young children that you've been homeschooling?
Well, no, even worse. I have a high school senior that we're trying to get to graduate. So it's, you know, definitely sympathize with everybody with young kids that they're actually trying to do the work, but try fighting with somebody to get up every day to go to school during the senior year. It's another battle, but that's life, right? There's always battles. Everybody thinks, you know, this is the worst situation, but till you go through someone else's, and it's just, I don't know. I feel bad for the kids though. You know, to be honest, it's hard for the kids because one, they're not used to it. You know, they're used to learning a certain way the whole entire time. Then you've got the seniors who look at it like, you know, their homecoming's canceled, all their football games are canceled. These kids look, you know, for their whole life, they couldn't wait to be, you know, part of the student section at a basketball game, or they couldn't wait to be the, you know, the starting point guard on the basketball team. And then, you know, it's all canceled, or they couldn't wait to, you know, finally ask that one girl or guy to homecoming, and it's canceled. Like, so yeah, of course they don't want to get up for school in the morning. They could care less at this point. You know, they're just over it. And I don't know. That's a whole other thing.
Well, but I hear you. And when I'm talking with teams and when I'm talking to team members who are in situations, one of the things that I say is, first and foremost, as a parent, give yourself grace, because you're not going to get this right. Just like we talked about leaders, nobody knows how to do this. So a leader, give yourself grace. Nobody has a blueprint for this, which, you know, I said that one time to somebody. I'll come back to my thought. I said that one time to somebody when I was talking about education, and the person told me that I was wrong. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Where am I wrong? And the person said that the CDC had the plan for how to navigate through a pandemic, and he was the president. And I said, I don't talk politics, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with you, but nobody had a plan for this. So as a parent, you don't have a plan, give yourself grace. And then you just brought up the children. When you think about young kids who don't understand that they can't go and do the things that they want to do. And then for children like your son, is a son that you have?
Yeah, my son. Yeah, thank goodness my daughter, we already head off to college when all this happened.
Yeah. But you know, you're talking about kids who've had freedom. You're talking about kids who have looked forward to these things all their lives, like you said. And there are some people who would say, oh, it's only homecoming. No, at that age in your life, homecoming is a big deal.
Sure.
And so give them grace as well, because nobody knows how to do this. And I really think that's really where we fell down this year in the world, is we stopped caring about people, and we stopped thinking that everybody, you know, people say we're all in the same storm, which we are, but we're all in different boats. And how about just start with a central theme that we're all hurting in our own way, and let's be nice to each other. I don't know. It just sounds like a great idea to me.
Well, I think when we try to find a purpose for our lives, that's where a lot of times it goes. If you say, well, I want to do this because of such and such, and then you peel back the onion of like, really, why do you want to do something, and why do you want to go after this goal, or why do you want to be successful? And if you peel it back enough, I think you find the fact that you just want to be loved. And that's a lot of it. You know, you find that that's the real reason. You want to be loved by your peers. You want to be loved by your family, your friends. And, that's a lot of it. That's the reason why, when you really peel back the parts of it. And I think, maybe that's what you're saying here is that, in this year, everybody's got different circumstances. Sure, everybody's going through the same pandemic, but everyone's circumstances are different on the pandemic. And just because, you're not in the same situation as somebody else faced with it, doesn't mean that you're not having a difficult time with it, or just a different time with it, even if it's not difficult.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And one of the things that I've done in working with teams and other leaders is let's be people-centric. Let's put our people first, which is really so simple as checking in and asking how they're doing. So there's a team that I work with, and when this all started, I started having just weekly check-in calls where I just simply ask, how are you doing, really? And I listen. And when the racial tensions bubbled up, I had the same conversation. And a leader within the company got wind of what I was doing and put me on a call with her and the HR person and said, that's not your job. And I said, what's not my job? And they said, you're not a counselor. And I said, no, I'm not a counselor. I'm not counseling these people. And I said, you understand that I'm certified by 2 different organizations as a coach, and I'm not even coaching them. I'm sitting with these people who are struggling, and I'm having a heart, and I'm asking them how they're doing. And if you believe that that's not a function of leadership, you shouldn't be in a leadership role. And I firmly believe that.
What do you base your principles off for leadership that you teach?
Well, before I knew the right words, because I've been in leadership roles since the early 90s, because, I'm slightly old, and I've always led with my heart, but I didn't know what that meant. And then when I started reading John Maxwell, and I got connected with the John Maxwell team, a lot of it are his principles to be people-centered, heart-focused, value-based leadership. And if I had to describe my leadership style, that's it. I'm not a person who believes that because I have a title in front of my name, I'm the leader. I'll bow down before me and listen. That's not what I do. And it doesn't make me a leader because somebody put me in a position. And so I really try to make sure that one of my favorite quotes is, success is when you add value to yourself. significance is when you add value to others. And that's really where I hang. I hang in my role as a leader is to identify the potential in my team and bring them to their fullest potential. And when that happens, I win.
Do you think that teams are always watching leaders, even when the leader feels like maybe nobody's watching? You know, is somebody still watching?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people leave an organization because of the leader. And I firmly
Would you
believe,
repeat that one time?
I said the majority of people leave a company or an organization because of the leader.
I think there was a study that came out about that in articles. So what you're saying is that they're not leaving the organization or the company. They're leaving the boss. That's who they're leaving, right? They're leaving. Yeah. And would you dive into that for us?
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I resigned from a company one time with a 2-sentence resignation letter. And the first sentence said, I'm resigning from my position effective, and I had the date. And the second sentence said, I learned a lot from you as a leader. And the woman put her hand on my arm and she said, thank you. And I said, oh, it's not good. I just didn't want to put that in the letter. And then I explained to her. People, a lot of times, are promoted into a leadership role based on years of being in a corporation, who they know, or they may be a great content expert. Maybe you're a great salesperson, and now they're going to put you over as the CEO of a company. And we don't train people how to be a leader. In the world that I worked in, we would put people in leadership roles based on their resume. So if they passed the sniff test, we put them in a leadership role. And then we didn't help them be a better leader. Now, a lot of times these people didn't want to be in a leadership role. They just took that position because it was more money. And then we kind of set them up for failure. And that really started to weigh on me, that I was part of a system that was setting people up for failure in a leadership role.
Yeah, I think we found that in our own organization too. You know, sometimes people leave and then you just do one of those things where you look around and you're like, okay, who can we hand keys to? And, and then for the next, as long as that person's there, he's already set up for failure. So the whole time that he's failing the organization, you're complaining about him. And, so that brings me to like one of my greatest traits I think a leader needs to have. And that's, what I always say is they need to be able to blame themselves. When anything ever goes wrong in my life or my organization, I always blame myself. Now, this isn't easy. And I've said this before. Sometimes I've got to take my dog and go for a long, long walk and not turn around till I'm ready to take the blame, to figure out where I went wrong. But that's important, right? Shouldn't a leader be able to blame himself? I know, you can say whatever you want about certain football quarterbacks and whether they're great on the field but I always have looked up to our hometown quarterback here, Ben Roethlisberger, because on a Tuesday morning after the game or Monday morning after the game, he always blames himself. And, he had a terrible game recently. And one of the things he said was, look, if I can't do my job, I'm just going to retire. And, I think that says a lot of a leader, right?
Oh, I do too. And when I saw that, I was like, yes, not that I want him to retire, but that's exactly what a leader is. I tell people all the time when I'm coaching them, and I walk the same talk that I give to others. As the leader, if something great happens, I'm going to make sure the team is recognized. I don't take the glory for it. But when the poop hits the fan, I'm the one standing up and taking full responsibility. Even if it wasn't mine, I will take responsibility publicly. And then, behind the scenes, I'll work with the person who might have made a mistake, and to make sure that they understand what it was expected. I really, I struggle a lot sometimes with leaders when they talk about, we have performance reviews, and that's where we find out what's working and what's not. Performance review should never be a surprise. You should never walk into a performance review and find out that you stunk and now you're going to get fired. When you bring somebody on, when you put them in a position, They need to know exactly what the expectations are up front, and they need to know what accountability looks like. And if you set that up front, that to me is the leader's role, one of their roles. You set that up front, and then you make course corrections through the year. And if somebody, messes up, have a conversation with them, explain again to them. But if the person then decides not to make changes, well, then you need to let them go. So many times leaders want to be liked or loved. You mentioned that earlier, and they won't make those difficult decisions. So, there's the law of a bad apple. One bad apple spoils the whole bunch. If you keep that problematic person in your office because you just don't want to let them go, or a situation that I had one time, the boss said, well, I go to church with her, it'll be awkward. No, well, is she doing her job at work? Absolutely not. Well, then bless and release her and put somebody in the position that can do the job.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely right, especially the part about somebody shouldn't be surprised that they're doing a bad job and that's why they got fired. I know early on in our organization, we had a problem where people were late all the time. And it was one of those things that, we were putting up with it. So that's why it was happening. And then finally we said, okay, that's it. Here's the line in the sand. We're going to let people go if they're late, and we didn't do a good enough job of saying, they need to be warned still. Like we let them do this for 2 years. You can't just walk in and fire everybody. Like, they need to know, like, hey, this is, we're the line's in the sand now. You need to be on time. This is the process. The first time you're going to be warned. This is your warning. The next time you're written up, and then you're going to be fired. Well, managers go back there and so-and-so will call up. We don't have a worker for tomorrow. Why? Because we fired this guy because he was late. Well, he was late for the last 2 years. You never even told him. Like all of a sudden, and then that's when I said, look, it doesn't matter if a guy's late or if he has an attitude problem or he's just not performing his job correctly. Whatever it is, nobody will ever be surprised again if they're fired. We've had situations where we got to sit down and tell the guy, like, look, this is what's going on. You're probably not going to be with us if you don't correct this. And then the next time when it comes up 2 weeks later and they're performing the same behavior, and we sit down and say, hey, remember when we talked 2 weeks ago? Yeah. And it actually makes the exit a lot easier too, than being surprised. And yeah.
No, I agree. Absolutely. At one point with one of the companies that I worked with, they would rotate supervisors a lot. And so I was in West Virginia and the majority of the team were in other states, but I would supervise people either in West Virginia or other states. And so let's just say on Wednesday, I get my new supervisee. So Nick, it's going to be you. So Wednesday, I'm now your supervisor. Thursday morning, my boss and the previous supervisor call me and say, you have to fire Nick. And me being me, I'm like, what the hell did he do overnight? And they're like, oh, no. He's had a history of problems. Does Nick know he's had a history of problems? And they said no. And I said, well, so here's what we're going to do. I'm not firing Nick. I'm going to fly up to the office and I'm going to have a meeting with Nick. And I'm going to talk to Nick and I'm going to talk about what he's been doing. I'm going to talk to Nick about what the expectations are. I'm going to talk to Nick about how he's going to be held accountable. And they said, great, so you're going to put him on an improvement plan. I said, no. I'm having my set conversation with him. And then if Nick doesn't want to improve as we move forward, then we'll make some changes. But those are the things that really bug me, that you put somebody in a leadership role that is so afraid to have that difficult conversation that they don't know how to lead, and then they pass it off on somebody else. And
so how do you deal with that leader that always has excuses?
I need a clarifying question. So excuses in terms of his or her behavior, or excuses in terms of others' behavior?
Anything. So when I say anything, this is what I mean. Like if you ask somebody like, hey, this happened at the job, you're in charge of the company. Why did this happen? And then they say, well, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I didn't even know it happened. I wasn't there at that time. Or if you ask them, a direct question about, hey, when you were there, this happened. Well, this broke and that broke, and we couldn't really get it done because this broke. Like everything, there's never that correct answer of, yep, I'll look into it, or I got you, or hey, the simple sometimes it's just I messed up. So I was told that years ago when I was young, if you mess up, just, hey, I messed up. And I have said that to my team before. I've looked them in the face, say, I messed up. And it goes a long way. And I just wonder, how do you deal with the guy who's supposed to be in charge that always has excuses?
Well, it goes back to what we said earlier in terms of somebody who won't take responsibility. And the other one that I think a leader has to have humility. And humility is just what you talked about right there, that you have to be able to say that I did mess up. So, I coached a leader a few years back who was like that. And we kind of went through, okay, so it wasn't your issue, whose was it? So, we kind of kept going down to you keep asking questions and you see the light bulb go up, and ultimately they realize it's them. And so then, all right, what can we do to strengthen you as a leader? So you recognize this in the beginning, because it's so much easier to push it off on other people. Let's just be real. It's so much easier when people who do that, there's always something underlying it. And I'll dig into it to find out. And it gets to, again, the belief systems a little bit, and what you were talking about, wanting to be liked. So we all have something that we're battling with. And so you have a leader who it's so important for him or her to have this outside facing persona of being the expert and in charge. And if anything goes wrong, they're going to blame it on other people because they're so insecure internally that they can't handle that type of criticism. And I tell people all the time, and this is something that's really difficult for people to understand, you can't take business personal. You just can't. So if you and I are working on a project and you don't meet the deadline, and I talk to you about not meeting the deadline, I'm not talking about you as a person. I'm talking about you in work. But people have a really difficult time separating themselves from their work. And I think that's a huge problem.
What's important mindset characteristics of a leader?
Well, humility is on the top one. Being able to say, yeah, I'm not the smartest person in the room. You guys have good ideas. Let's brainstorm them. And don't just do that for show. Don't walk in and say, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Let's brainstorm. And then you've got your idea that you already work. How many times has that happened? I think humility is important. Integrity. You should be doing what you say you're doing, walking your talk, so to speak. So whatever you're asking other people to do, you should be doing it. We've seen this play out how many times in recent months with the leaders in the political world. Thou shalt nots of their state people. We're not, and what do? They turn around and they go out to dinner, or they turn around and they're not wearing a mask, or they're traveling. Yeah, that right there, you've got an integrity issue. And the other thing that's really important for me, and this is something that's really been weighing heavy on me this year. And I'm a person of faith, but I don't bring my faith into a corporation. That's, a no. You can't bring your faith into a corporation, but I can bring my values in. And my values in my mind are equated to my faith. So to be a person of integrity, to listen intently, to work to inspire others. If you lead with your values, then leading is just an extension of what you do. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. It makes sense. how does one improve their leadership skills?
Well, acknowledging first and foremost that they have an issue. So when I joined the John Maxwell team back in 2017, I had been in leadership roles since the 90s. But guess what? I wasn't always good. And I was able to recognize that. So I recognized that I wasn't good, but I knew that I couldn't do it on my own. And so I sought out other people who could help me, who could, coach me. You talked earlier about the person who said, hey, I bought a book, I don't need you. Well, it's all well and good to bring information inside, but how do you use it? Reading a book or putting your hand on a book, and by osmosis, you become a better leader. It's all about application. And I kind of, joke and I say I'm the new AAA. It's all about application. You have to use it, and having somebody who works with you, a mentor in a company, a supervisor, a colleague, a coach, having somebody who holds you accountable for what you say you're going to do. That truly is, in my humble opinion, the only way you improve is by growing and stretching yourself.
And for somebody that's heard you talk about John Maxwell and maybe they're not familiar with his works, would you give us a little history on John Maxwell?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so basically, John is the international leadership guru. He's in his early 70s. The man has written well over 100 leadership books. And he started in the religious sect, in the ministry. And so, so a lot of people get turned off by that sometimes because he does have a religious slant to him. But what I absolutely love and admire about him is when he talks, he said, listen, I'm a person of faith. I don't put it on people. I'm not going to push it on you. And if you're not a person of faith, I still love you anyway. And I love that about him. But I have one of my hashtags is simple yet profound. And I shared this with John one time, and I was very careful with how I said it. What he says, the guidance that he gives is very simple. I mean, we're not talking, brain surgery on leadership, but it is so profound and impactful if you listen to it and you implement it.
Yeah, I know that I've always found his teachings and writings very, very helpful. More than reading them, he's got a lot of great seminars he's taught, and places where if you're an Audible member, which I make sure I get the best subscription to Audible, you can find some really I don't want to say off the cuff, but they're like live tapings of them that are just fantastic. And that's where I like catching a lot of those older guys going through their teachings almost 20 years ago. And then when you listen to them today, it's amazing that, their message really hasn't shifted as much as you would think it would for 20 or 30 years, because it's really based off of some strong principles. And I think that's what I always am fascinated with leadership, is they are based off of some really deep core principles, like you talked about, with number one being humility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so you think about John Maxwell, you think about Les Brown, you think about Zig Ziglar. I mean, you go back to some of the greats, still some of the greats. And their message is consistent, and there's similar threads throughout all of theirs, because come on, the leadership principle is a good leadership principle no matter what. It's how you tweak it. There are others that are saying the same thing. I won't mention names, but have a different style, a little more edgy and in your face. And that's great, because, I can deal with that as well. What I look at is the person that is offering me advice or writing the book, are they using it themselves, and are they successful? So for example, I foolishly invested in another program before I learned that John had a team. And the way it went, I invested a good bit of money to learn how to make myself a better leader. And what I got was when it was time for the, Zoom meeting, the guy looked like he just got done, like running a 10K. And he would hop in the frame and he's like, hey, whoa, yeah, what are we going to talk about? And he's talking to somebody off camera. Yeah, I don't want to learn from that person. I mean, I don't want to learn from the person that's not giving me the time of day to be prepared. And yeah, so what I tell people is, if you're interested in improving your leadership, if you're interested in working with a coach, sample a lot of them. Find the best fit for you. So just like I said, I might not be the best fit for everybody. You have to find the best fit for you. And there's all kinds of great podcasts. There's books, there's trainings, everything's virtual these days. You can get all the information you need, but are you going to do something with it?
And that's what I think that's great about, the mentors that you always hear, boy, you need a great mentor. And people are like, well, where do I find a mentor? And I think that's what's great about this day and age is, like you just said, it could be somebody who has a podcast. They look to them as a mentor, and they, listen to them so much they feel like they know them, even though they maybe never met them. There's so many great authors out there. You can read all their books, or like I mentioned with John, you can actually go and even get one step farther and start listening to some of these raw teachings that he's had over the years. And I think that's what's great is, I have found myself that I've shifted. There's times where I listen to somebody all the time, and then I find the next person that I listen to a lot. And I always, in times like the beginning of COVID, I was like, okay, I've built this foundation on a lot of core principles, but at the same time, I felt like I needed to remind myself of kind of where I came from and how I base these principles off of. So I found myself reading books the ones that I loved, and listening to some of these programs of people that, were the first real fundamentalists that I listened to as far as leadership or self-development and self-improvement. And I went back to them this year, and I found a lot of comfort in that. And I think that, it's important to kind of sometimes reinvest into what you've learned, because as you become a different person, you work and grow into a new position. When you read these teachings from that you grew a lot upon, you find yourself in a different spot today than you were when you read it maybe 5 years ago. So you end up getting a lot different parts of the book or different parts of the teaching. Do you find that as well?
No, absolutely. So some of the old cliches that you hear, you only grow when you get outside your comfort zone, and we're continually growing. And I believe those wholeheartedly. And that's what you just said. I mean, there's a teaching, a book, or a person that inspired me 15 years ago that helped me. So that's my departure point. And that helped me get to my next position. Well, I'm a completely different person in this new position. And I need to either go back and listen to it with different ears of who I am now, or find somebody else. I find, I get teased a lot on LinkedIn because I post quotes from different people. I mean, some of my favorites are Dr. Seuss and Winnie the Pooh. And there are leadership life quotes in those things. But I find inspiration from all kinds of different people. And if it's something that speaks to me, and if I can make it applicable for somebody to understand a concept that I want to teach, because I'm not going to be that person that uses $25 words and lectures to you. I am who I am always. And I don't put airs up. And those are the people that I gravitate towards. So, if somebody's completely different on stage, and when they get off the stage, they're another person, I don't want to. So definitely find out what speaks to you, who inspires you, but always do something, because I think each and every day we're growing. And what got you to the point of where you are now is not going to keep you there.
I think you brought up a good point there. I know for myself, I don't want to say idolize, but you find out that you like somebody so much, you can't wait to meet them, can't wait to go to a seminar or something. And then you get there and you meet the person, you're like, really? Like
Yeah,
that's
whoosh.
it? Yeah. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing better than when you want to, the same thing, you're going through, you've read all their works, you've idolized them, and then you meet them and they are better in person. There's nothing better than that feeling. It kind of just reaffirms like, man, I'm so glad, and I think that's when you know that, okay, I want to dive even more into somebody's studies.
Yeah, and I'll give you a great case in point. About 2 or 3 years ago, John was having a live training on one of his a book release, and I was going to it. And one of the speakers was Rachel Hollis. Well, everybody was super excited about Rachel Hollis. I had no idea who she was. And so like I'm in the audience Googling her, and I'm like, I'm probably not going to get excited about her. and she was pretty impactful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I went and saw Bob Proctor a couple years ago, and he was fantastic. Like it was everything that I ever thought it would be. But, his team around him, they were all really focused on selling, because I think they're all worried, like what happens when, guys like 84, they're like, what happens when he's not here anymore? And we're not going to be able to put him up and let him teach. Really, you could tell that his life's work and his joy was just to stand in front of a room and really just enlighten people and teach them. And it's funny when you start to see like that's what I think he did for so many years. But then you see like the organization trying to see how they can monetize it, farther. And I think that's what gets lost sometimes in these seminars and groups and stuff, is that they try to sell, and that's where the turnoff comes. Sell. I don't know. I appreciate that everyone's trying to make money, but I also appreciate when it's like at the very end. Okay, if you found some value out of this is the next program you could buy today. It's a discounted rate, one time only. If you want even more information, here's another. Buy this, but not the whole. 2 days you're there, sell. Like, that's just my approach.
No, I'm with you on that. I mean, and I struggle with it a little bit, even though in corporate, I was corporate development and I could do it. When I step out on my own, I'm only as good as my next, client, but I don't want to force me on them. And so it happens up on stage. It happens, it happens on social media. I mean, come on, how many requests do you get and they seem legit, and then the very first message is them selling to you? And and I absolutely love it. At one point I was trying to be nice, and I would say, thank you, I'm just not interested. And then this one person told me why I was wrong and I needed that, and I'm like, yeah, no, delete. So I don't need Bitcoin. I probably should have invested in Bitcoin a lot sooner now, but I haven't. I don't need Bitcoin. I don't need websites. I don't need, hey, I work with coaches and I'll make you successful. Well, you just assume that I'm unsuccessful, and then my personal favorite are the people who reach out to me and tell me I have a lovely smile. What the heck does that have to do with any of my work? So create a relationship. Get to know the people that you're talking with. Don't just talk at them, talk with them, and create that buy-in of you as a person that has something that would meet their needs. And then see where it goes. But don't sell to me. That's one of the biggest turnoffs ever, from a stage, in person, on a cold call, in a message on social media.
And that's what I have really liked about LinkedIn. If we're talking about networking, I think that LinkedIn's been fantastic because for the most part, you could tell very quickly which way a conversation is going to go on LinkedIn. I think that the people on LinkedIn that are setting up messages to say, hey, when somebody joins my network, send them this message. I think that's terrible because it's the same message. Everybody knows it's canned. I just am always reading. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in what you do and why you do it and why you're the best person. And I just had the luckiest day of my life because I found you, I just don't see that. But I do appreciate the person on LinkedIn that says, hey, never been friends with a world pizza champion before. And it's cool that you have a podcast. Like, here's what I do. If there's any way we can ever work together, you know, shoot me a link, you know, like that I appreciate. And I probably will, you know, we've had a lot of guests on the show just from that, like just from a simple, people are really talking to each other. It's a real connection.
Yeah, no, I love that. And to me, it's a two-way street as well. You know, I want to value, respect, and lift others up. And I want them to also do that to me, or, you know, because it's just not for one thing. And so just a few of the things that you were talking about, one of my connections recently had, you know, just kind of talked about the different people on LinkedIn. And the one was like the lazy connector who will send you a connection and says, hey, what do you do? Go look at my profile.
Yeah.
You know, it says if you can't even invest enough time to look at my profile, I know you're not a real person. And then somebody that I trusted had asked me to have a conversation with one of their connections. And the whole time the person was talking to me, it was like, well, you know, I only work with really committed people. I don't waste my time with other people. And I'm like, hello, I'm right here. Look at me. And I thought, well, you reached out to me. If you don't even think I'm committed, we don't need to talk. And my time's valuable. Your time's valuable. I am so about encouraging others and help them be successful. I truly am, probably to my own detriment that I forget that I'm in business for myself. But don't waste my time and I won't waste your time. I mean, it's just that simple sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the communication and, you know, just the overall way to do business and the integrity of it. And I don't know, I think this day and age, people can read through all, like you said, all the Forex and all the different types of scams out there. And I don't know, you know, sometimes I've gotten people, I had a really nice conversation with somebody on LinkedIn. They said, hey, you know, what was the reason that you connected? And I said, well, I was trying to reach out to fellow speakers. And they said, well, that was my past life 10 years ago. You know, I still on my profile, but, you know, really I'm a poet now. And there's really, you know, I'm not really into the connecting with you. And we ended up having a nice conversation. And she was like, you know what, it was a nice conversation. We could watch each other's work from a distance, and, you know, ended up accepting the invite. But I think it's just, when you find it's a real person and you have real conversations, it goes a lot farther, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I want to have those conversations, but I'm leery of the connection who says, well, I just want to have a conversation to learn what you do. And then when we get on the call, before I even get 2 words out, let me tell you what I do. And now we're into a sales job. And I'm like, yeah, I thought I was important here.
Yeah, and I know I'm on a lot of like on Facebook, a lot of groups that are like small business groups or whatever it is. And someone will ask like, who has a restaurant? I'm like, no, don't answer that. You know, like, yeah.
No, I so agree. I mean, I have an abundance mindset. There's more than enough work for all of us. I'm not in competition. My only competition is who I was yesterday to be better. And I truly believe that. And if people don't want to associate with me or work with me, that's fine. I'll find the people who do.
Tell us more about your abundance mindset and where you found it.
You know, that's connected to my limiting self-beliefs. So I was very successful my whole life, but I function with not being good enough, not being enough. And that came all the way back from being the middle child growing up. You know, there's all kinds of reasons for all of this. But when I really realized that it was such an issue that I had to take care of, it was connected with when I made that decision to resign from corporate, because I had found out that a colleague that I was working with had secretly recorded me, audio and video, and journaled about me for 10 plus years. And at the point where I did something that made this person not happy, then I found out about that. And as I was sitting in this meeting and people were telling me this, and I'm like looking around, and I realized nobody else has an issue with this but me. And it was at that moment that I stood up and said, I resign. And something that ugly. It had to happen to me to force me to realize that I'm attracting these people into my life, and I need to not do that. And so I had a scarcity mindset of, I need people to like me. We talked about this earlier. I need to be valued. And once I realized I'm worth it, I'm not in competition with anybody else, it just worked. And people get on me a lot when I say that I have an abundant mindset. They'll say, well, you can't do everything you want to do. Well, yes, I can. I might not do it well, but I can do anything I want to do. And I'm going into the second part of my life with that mindset, because I'm not going to put the walls up around me like I did for the first part of my life. I mean, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I think what you're saying just hits to the core, because you're right. There's just a certain point where you realize that you've really been preconditioned your whole life. And then it's almost like a light bulb goes off when it's like, wait, I can have my own views and I can program my own mind and I can think exactly how I want to think. Like nobody's going to tell me what the way I should think. Like,
yeah,
I don't know, and I don't think that happens for everybody. But I do think that when you make those decisions to not be scared to worry about what others think about yourself, that's where it comes down and things change. And I think that abundance mindset is very, very important. And the self-worth is a lot of that. And I think you hit on that you have to realize that you are worthy of all of the good things that can come in your life.
Yeah, amen. And you talk about pre-programmed, and so you're going to get a little bit of the geek out of me if you've never read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. But he talks about the subcon. Why are you laughing? Have you read it?
That's our favorite book on the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I was in a book study on that book. And it's all about the subconscious. And there's one line in there, and I always say, I paraphrase it, but fear and faith make bad bedfellows. And that was when the light bulb went off, that if I'm up here all negative, there's no room for positive thoughts. And I really had to work on it. And one of the most powerful and most difficult things I ever did, I was challenged to, keep track of what follows I am. And I got to tell you, my I am was a plethora of negative words. And it really hurt because I didn't even know I was saying it. I didn't even know how effortlessly I was putting myself down. And then I started working on positive ones. And I probably could have wrote the next American novel, 3,000 pages before I could come up with 100 positive things to say about myself, but I stuck with it. And that's where I talk about simple. It was a book written in the 30s that
right.
finally got me to see my own worth.
Yeah. It's such an important book. Without exaggerating, I would say I've read it 15 times. It's because, like I said, I go back to earlier where you feel like you're in a different place sometimes. So every time I read it, I get something different out of it. And it's amazing that if I have learned one thing off of running the podcast now, we're on like episode 80, we probably had at least, I think the first 20 or 30 I did by myself. So we're up to like maybe 50 guests or so. More than half, I would say 75%, if not more, mention Think and Grow Rich. So that's where the chuckle has come in over the last, 5 to 10 times. It's just it comes up every show. It's if you've been listening to this show for a lot of those different episodes and you haven't read the book yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Like, pick it up and read it. It'll change your life. I can say that with 100% guarantee. It'll change your life. Read it.
Yeah. And I would just add a little caveat there that get in a study group where you learn how to read it, because it's, when I first read it, we started with chapter 9, which is persistence. Because if you can't get into the habit of reading that chapter, the rest of it's not going to fall into place.
Yeah. And you're right. And that's one of those books too that I read it, I study it. And it's one of those books that sometimes I can pick up a book and read it during a weekend, just lazy, the fire's on, blanket, read a book. It's not that type of book. It's when I pick it up, I know I'm on a journey for the next month.
Absolutely. And I struggled with that at first, because, and I think it's where I've learned to take my own advice about applying the information that I read, because I could read a book in a night.
Right.
It didn't make a difference because I forgot everything I read. For me, it only is impactful if I see the value or importance of my life and I do something with it.
Right. Kimberly, you have been fantastic. Really appreciate you on the show today. Where can people get more of you if they want to get more of you?
Oh, well, I hope they want to get more of me. I hope I haven't turned them off already. So my company is KimberlyHamburgConsulting.com, and I'm on LinkedIn as Kimberly Hamburg. And, if you really want to do something fun, I'd love to flip the tables and have you all be on my podcast, The Cannoli Coach.
Yeah, I'd love to be on it for sure. Absolutely. So now it's the time we get to solve the equation to Kimberly's success. Kimberly, are you ready for 7 rapid fire questions?
Did I know there was a test?
There's always a test, right?
Okay.
Life's a test.
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Best seminar or teaching you've ever been to?
Hands down, John Maxwell International Certification Conference.
Favorite item you've bought recently under $100?
All right. So I've bought at least 10 storage bins. And when I tell you why this is my favorite item, you're probably going to not want to talk to me anymore. It appears around Thanksgiving, I had an uninvited guest in my house, which happened to be a mouse that brought then a said friend into my house. And they were living off my pantry. And I have thrown everything out. I've sealed up my mouse holes, and I am loving my pantry that is nothing but bins these days.
Name an idol or hero of yours that you met in person.
That's a tough one. Am I supposed to rapid fire answer back?
Well,
It was, and again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is a person that's connected with the John Maxwell team, Mark Cole. I knew of him, but when I had a chance to talk with him in person, and it's the reason that he is a hero of mine, is that I had met him at a time where I was pretty broken after leaving corporate. And he said to me, borrow the belief I have in you until yours matches. And I've never had somebody say something so impactful to me. And I do that for others.
Favorite book to give as a gift?
Well, I have 2. Can I give you 2?
Sure.
All right. So one is Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You Will Go. And my other second favorite is God Bless the Gargoyles.
Something you do every day before you brush your teeth?
Read the Bible.
Your personal mantra or favorite quote?
I'm worth it.
And place you go to decompress and reset?
At night when I take my dog out, I just stare up at the stars. There's nothing more calming than to hang out and look at the big universe.
Kimberly, thank you so much for being part of the show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.